Hey guys, it's Chris. From a creepy woman living inside a stranger's closet to a man in the walls, plus as many squatters and stalkers as you can handle. Here are 10 amazing stories of people found living in other people's homes. Number 10. The woman in the closet. In 2008, a man living alone in Japan began to notice some very strange happenings in his apartment. Whenever he opened the fridge, there always seemed to be something missing. He began to suspect that maybe he was sleep eating, if that's even a thing, I don't know. It took some time for the man to finally reason that somebody was breaking into his house and stealing his food. So he bought some surveillance cameras and linked them into his smartphone. While at work, the owner of the home checked his kitchen using his smartphone and his new surveillance camera. That was when he captured a woman taking food from his refrigerator and then sitting on his couch and watching his television. After she was done, the woman cleaned up and vanished. The man called the police right away, but even after they arrived at his home, they couldn't find the intruder. It wasn't until the officers checked inside the closet that they found a secret hiding place. It turned out that a homeless woman was living inside this guy's closet, and she'd been there for a year. She apparently snuck in one day when the man forgot to close his front door, then set up shop in a small nook inside the closet, coming down when he went to work so that she could shower, use the toilet, and eat his food. When she was finally discovered, she looked perfectly normal, nicely manicured and very clean. She was also quite well fed. Number 9. Boyfriend in the attic. Sometimes an ex-boyfriend can be clingy. This is just one of those unfortunate things that you can't always escape during a breakup. But what about an ex-boyfriend living in your attic over 12 years after you broke up? Now that's a stage 5 clinger, people. It's also an extremely ghoulish thing that happened to a woman in South Carolina when she heard a weird bump from her attic and noticed nails sticking out from her bedroom ceiling. She then felt like something wasn't right. But it wasn't a poltergeist or a devil making noises in her attic, it was her ex-boyfriend. He had apparently been residing inside her attic for roughly 2 weeks, ever since he was released from prison. According to Huffington Post, the pair had broken up 12 years earlier, and she never wanted to get back with him even after he had sent her letters from jail promising he'd changed. Apparently, this guy thought that sneaking into his ex's house and then setting up shop in her attic would be a great way to get her back. But what makes this story even more disturbing is that the man had been defecating inside the attic. He was using old cups as a toilet. He also had a bunch of old clothes he had found that he was using for a bed. Unfortunately, when he was discovered, the guy ran out of the house and into the street before the police could arrive. Hopefully, this woman is invested in some better locks. Do you have any scary stories of strangers in your house, or are you always super careful and lock your doors? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like this one. Number 8. Student squatter. College can be expensive, especially if you're living on campus. Students at Ohio State discovered a horrifying nightmare when it came to light that they had a roommate that they didn't even know about. For the longest time, a group of friends living together thought that a locked door in their basement led to a boring old utility closet. It wasn't until maintenance workers knocked the door down that they discovered a bedroom where an uninvited guest had been living. This would definitely be a big shock to anyone, but perhaps the biggest shock is that the uninvited guest was another university student in his 4th year of studying civil engineering. The room was complete with textbooks, framed photographs, and all the other intricacies of a normal life. After discovering the room, the roommates changed the locks on the door and posted a note asking their house guest to give them a friendly call, which he did later. It turned out that the guy was nice and normal enough, and he'd moved his belongings without a fuss. It's just that he wasn't really supposed to be living in the basement of the house. Number 7. Unwanted residents. A family in Colorado recently arrived home to find a group of strangers had moved into their house, and this is a nightmare situation. After the family left the state for work, they returned to the house that they owned to find random people occupying it. What's even more disturbing is that the family was forced to live in a relative's basement while they tried to regain their house. This is apparently more common and more troublesome than you might think. You can't simply break down the door and throw the people outside, although some people would definitely take that route. The family actually had to win an eviction order in court to get the strangers out of their home. And the squatters fought for their rights to live there tooth and nail. Imagine fighting to live in another person's house. That sounds absurd, but here's the issue. The people who moved in thought that they had legally purchased the home from a man named Alfonso Carrillo, who had since been charged with racketeering and theft. According to CBS Denver, those who illegally bought the home from Alfonso were ultimately charged with trespassing. Apparently, there is some kind of illegal ring that sells homes to people while the owners are out on vacation. So if you see a house being sold for extremely cheap online, you better make sure you talk to a realtor first. Number 6. Horror in the house. Nobody wants a stranger living in their attic. It's creepy, it's weird, and it's hard to believe that a stranger living in your attic isn't peeping at you through the cracks in the floor. Because guess what? They almost certainly are. What happened to a woman named Amber Dawn was so unusual it makes the story almost too hard to believe. It all happened after she moved into her new apartment. For 6 months, she endured some very strange happenings, which she had first mistook for some kind of paranormal activity. Footsteps thumping around in the attic, doors opening and closing all on their own, and all kinds of other strange things. She was convinced her house was haunted. It wasn't until one night when Amber was in the bathtub, relaxing because she felt kind of sick that day, that she realized someone else was living in the house with her. She was lying in the bathtub looking up at the ceiling when she realized there was somebody looking back at her through the attic floorboards. She had a peeper. Amber calmly got out of the bathtub, put on her robe, and escaped the house to call the police. However, whoever had been living in her house must have known the jig was up, as he was gone by the time the police arrived. To this day, Amber still has no idea who was living in her attic or why he was watching her through her floorboards. That is definitely creepy. Number 5. Living in the walls. According to American author Grady Hendrix, he had an old man living in the walls of his house as a little boy. So far as the author's story goes, he was 9 years old when he went downstairs one night to discover a man standing in his kitchen. He told his parents about the incident, but they simply assumed it was Grady's active imagination. In the following days, Grady began to notice very strange things going on in the house. He saw eyes watching him from within the air conditioning vents. He noticed things being moved around, and all the while, his parents ignored him, claiming that he was just an over-imaginative child. Of course, his parents started to believe him when a bad smell began to infiltrate the house. But it wasn't until maggots began falling from the air conditioning units that his parents really began to believe him. Shortly after, the dead body of a mysterious man was found inside the walls of Grady's house. According to the author himself, the man had set up a foam pad inside Grady's bedroom vent and had been watching him for months before dying of unknown causes. Number 4. Stalker on the balcony. A woman named Hannah had an incredibly uncomfortable encounter recently when she caught a stalker trying to break into her home from her second-floor balcony. What's really wild about this incident is that she caught the entire thing on video. She'd been recording herself dancing in her home in Maryland when she heard a strange noise. She then heard her balcony door click open. Immediately, she ran to shut the door, but it was too late. A strange man was now standing in her living room, asking her if they were friends. She tried to make the man leave, but he refused. She finally managed to get her phone and began to dial, which scared the man away. The entire thing was captured and uploaded to TikTok. But here's the scary part. The Hagerstown Police Department confirmed that the man who stalked and broke into Hannah's house was named Angel Moises Rodriguez Gomez and had already been arrested on charges of burglary, assault, stalking, and malicious destruction of property. Number 3. Squatter up above. So what is it with people living in other people's attics? It's kind of bizarre to really even think about. Yet another woman had the experience of her life when she learned of a man secretly living in her attic. This happened in Arlington, Virginia. One night when the woman was living in her house, she heard footsteps coming from her attic. It was the first time she had experienced anything strange in her home. According to NBC Washington, she quickly called her landlord to see if he was using the space for storage, which he sometimes did. This time, though, it turned out he wasn't. They called the police to come and search the attic, and they discovered a 60-year-old man, along with his clothes, some bedding, and a backpack full of stuff living inside the woman's attic. He was charged with unlawful entry, but nobody could determine how long he'd been living in the house or what he was planning to do with the woman who lived there. Number 2. South Carolina scam squatters. When a woman from South Carolina returned home from holiday, she was rather surprised to discover someone living inside of her house. The woman was 75 years old at the time of the incident, and she found a 22-year-old woman residing inside of her home. But the squatter said she wasn't squatting, but that she had begun to rent the house after responding to a Facebook ad and signing a lease. But here's where the story gets really interesting. This is one of those scams where somebody tells you to send them the first month's rent, and then they'll mail you the keys. This is something that no one in the internet should ever fall for. The scammer claims that they lost the keys, and they tell you to go in through the back door of the house. In this case, it happened that the house actually belonged to someone who wasn't there. The poor senior citizen came home to find the woman totally oblivious and living peacefully inside of her house. The woman who actually owned the house was quite nice about it though. She gave the young girl a few days to get all her stuff out, and everything worked out in the end. Number 1. Intruder in the crawlspace. Crawlspaces are kinda just creepy on their own. Almost nobody wants to venture down into the crawlspace of their house for fear of being eaten by ghosts or maybe even spiders. So it makes sense that Velma Kellen had no idea that she was sharing her home with a total stranger for almost a year. There were some signs throughout the months preceding her discovery of the stranger, such as the backyard gate being left open, a strange smell permeating the house, and an unexplainable amount of coldness inside of her home. It was actually the coldness that had Velma call a furnace repairman. The repairman crawled down into the crawlspace to see where the heat was escaping, and that was when the discovery was made. It turned out that somebody had made their home inside of the vents connected to the furnace in the crawlspace. The intruder had cut the heating duct to better warm himself. Luckily for him though, he wasn't there when the repairman arrived. Velma locked her crawlspace and made it inaccessible, and as of yet, she has not had any more problems. Which of these stories creeped you out the most? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to World List and come back soon for another creepy but amazing video.